Hello and welcome back to the Abject, specifically to part 2 of my self-isolation super spectacular. Now, I clearly have no idea how to run a YouTube channel. If I did, I would be talking about some highly clickable movie like The Human Centipede or a Serbian film. Instead, I'm talking about a film that could not be further from the public consciousness, and that is Albert Serra's The Death of Louis XIV. Now, even within art film circles, this film doesn't seem to be particularly well seen or talked about. But since Serra has a new film that has just premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, I thought I would go back and have a look at one of his older films. I must admit, before I started watching this, I was dreading an experience similar to my experience watching Werckmeister Harmonies, which is to say, absolute crushing boredom. Now, The Death of Louis XIV is a very, very slow film, and a very dry film, but I'm delighted to say that I found it deeply arresting and richly rewarding.
Feriez-vous l'immense plaisir de venir avec nous?
S'il vous plaît, sire.
Non, je préfère me coucher. Ça me donne la nausée.
Le lait d'ânesse est une prescription appropriée.
There's not much plot to summarise here. The film concerns the final days of King Louis in 1715, as he is bedridden due to a leg infected by gangrene. Surrounded by helpless sycophants, he yells, he groans, and eventually suffers an unpleasant and undignified death. The first thing I really want to highlight about this movie is the texture of it. Now, texture isn't a very concrete thing to talk about during a film review, but it's really important for my enjoyment of the film. I felt that the mise-en-scene, the costumes, the lighting, everything just combined to create what I felt was a really pleasurable sensory experience, despite the grim subject matter. Normally when people praise the aesthetics of a movie, it's something very overtly stylized like Mandy or Neon Demon or Drive, and this is very stylized, just not in that exact same very obvious way. It's kind of like watching a Renaissance painting in motion. Or if you want a bit more of a modern reference point, it's like 1700s palliative care ASMR.
Hello and welcome to Benjamin Woodard ASMR. Today's video is Old Man Slowly Dies of Gangrene Roleplay.
In contrast to the film's regal textures, we have a real deep focus on the intimate details of death and decay. It actually reminded me in parts of My Boy York Butgerite, although a little bit less explicit, shall we say. But still, there is a lot of focus on the nature of the king's physical decline, his black, gangrenous leg. You hear the sound of flies buzzing around towards the end of the film. There's also a lot of very grim emphasis on the king's personal decay. Like the fact that he can barely open his mouth to drink water or be fed food probably takes up 20 minutes of the film's running time, spread throughout the course of the movie. It's a very harsh and unsentimental reminder of how unpleasant the end of one's life can be, how powerless one can be, even if one is the King of France. Pacing is such an important part of a film, and it is something so many films struggle with. See my review of the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot for more details on that. But despite being such a slow movie, I really enjoyed the pacing of this. I thought it was pretty close to spot on. I think part of why the very slow pacing of this movie works is that it feels like it's not such a bad thing to zone out at times. If you drift away into your thoughts for a little bit, that's okay. It's almost like you're watching a lava lamp or a very, very bleak screensaver. It feels to me that one of the key aspects of this film, one of its real preoccupations, is performance. All the people surrounding the king are sycophantic, and even though he is on his deathbed, they are keen to keep up certain appearances because that's just what you do in 1700s France. Maybe my favourite scene in the movie is just a brief little bit where they are rubbing some leaves and water on the king's gangrenous leg, as if that's gonna fucking do anything. The king says it's relieving his pain, the doctors say that oh yes, this should do some good, but frankly, we know that everyone in the movie knows that this isn't going to do anything to save his life or his leg. There's a terrific scene early in the film where the king is struggling to eat like half a teaspoon of egg yolk for his dinner. The whole court is watching him, and when he swallows his food, they erupt into rapturous applause as if he's completed some gargantuan task. It's sly and it's satirical, and I think it's a really interesting movie in terms of analysing the way we act around power.
Bravo, Sia.
The anchor that holds the film together is of course the lead performance by Jean-Pierre Léaud as King Louis. Now, before I watched this I had no idea who he was, but turns out he's worked with Truffaut, he's in 400 Blows, and the guy is French cinema royalty. I of course didn't know this because I instead waste my time watching shit like Trash Humpers. It's an absolutely terrific performance, although not the sort of performance I'm usually attracted to. I tend to go towards really maximalist ones. Lots of screaming and yelling. Like Cheryl Lee in Fire Walk With Me is my favourite performance of all time, and that is a very maximalist performance. This is a lot more minimal. It is very subtle, and for large portions of the movie he doesn't do much but grunt and moan and make these sort of muffled noises. And yet it is so absolutely convincing. The subtlety of his performance, the authenticity of it, I think it's absolutely amazing. If you're watching this video and you have not seen this movie, which is frankly quite possible, then I really advise that you go out and see it if you're feeling a little bit adventurous and you can take movies that are on the slower side. I fucking hate the phrase underrated gem or hidden gem. Those are some of my least favourite sequences of words in the English language, but frankly, I think this movie deserves that title. Check it out, and if you're brave, do it in a double feature with Michael Haneke's Amour. That's sure to cheer you up.